Ambassador, welcome. Ambassador, Kosovo and Serbia have committed at the White House on economic normalization by signing separate documents on it. But the main issue at stake here is the mutual recognition. When do you think that will happen?
Well, I think that it's difficult to set a timeline or a deadline for any of this, Amra. The goal of the United States is to encourage a process that will end in full normal relations between the two countries. And what President Trump wants to do is to focus first on the economic dimension. You know, the efforts to solve all the political problems have dragged on for years without a lot of progress. So the president said, why don't we flip this and try to focus first on the economic issues that are of most direct relevance to ordinary citizens of both countries. And we think that this is already demonstrating its value. And what we do on the economic track is meant to complement and encourage the steps that will be undertaken on the political track. But I can't tell you how long it will take until full political normalization between Kosovo and Serbia is a reality.
Who will oversee the implementation of the agreement?
Well, it's fundamentally the responsibility of the governments of Kosovo and Serbia to fulfill the pledges that they made in Washington. Of course, the United States is closely following this, and much of the progress will depend on the role of U.S. business and also U.S. government agencies. But all we can do is support. Just as on the struggle against COVID, just as in the struggle against corruption in Kosovo, there's a great deal that Kosovo's friends can do to support you. But in the end, it's up to the people and leaders of Kosovo to make it real.
Do you also see the European Union engaged into the implementation of this agreement?
We think that the work that was done in Washington complements the work that's being done in Brussels by the European Union. There is some overlap in the agenda items, certainly. When we talk about the economic development of Kosovo and Serbia, when we talk about strengthening economic cooperation in the region, of course there's a role for the European Union in that, and it's something we talk to them about. What we want to do, though, is get away from focusing just on process and rules and protocol and focus on achievable actions.
Based on the agreement, both parties will prohibit the use of 5G equipment supplied by untrusted vendors. Is Huawei an untrusted vendor for the United States? This issue has been widely discussed, especially in Serbia, considering the connections and cooperation with this Chinese company.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm not the U.S. ambassador to Serbia, so I'll stay away from talking about exactly what Serbia's plans are. I do know that the government of Kosovo has made very clear in the past that it understands America's concerns about Huawei and will be moving away from any Huawei or related technology in telecom in Kosovo, and we're very pleased about that.
Ambassador, who will finance the projects which have been agreed upon at the White House?
I don't think there's a firm answer for that yet, Amra. As we've discussed, our Development Finance Corporation is looking at a major presence in the region, including in Kosovo. Our EXIM Bank, Export-Import Bank, has a role to play. We also hope that there will be private sector investment, and certainly European investment. I mean, as you noted earlier, there is certainly a European role in strengthening the regional trade and regional infrastructure development between Kosovo and Serbia and among all the countries in the Western Balkans. So I think that all of this is going to be a topic for intense discussion in the months ahead, but nothing is settled yet.
Are we talking about loans or donations, financial help when it comes to these projects?
I think we're talking about all manner of financial instruments, loans, loan guarantees, private sector investment, and really all of this is going to come more into focus in the weeks and months ahead.
Ambassador, going back to the agreement from the White House, one of the points that caused dissatisfaction in Kosovo, especially among opposition parties, is the conduct of the feasibility study on the shared use of Lake Uimani or Gazivode. Do you believe that Serbia has share in this lake?
We believe that it's very easy to say no to things, and it's much harder to say yes, or even to say maybe. Let's take a look. We have tried to explain that our goal here is to have a Department of Energy team come in to do a feasibility study about the uses of the lake for energy and also for reliable water supply. And reliable energy, reliable water supply is a big problem for Kosovo and neighboring countries. I understand the history. I understand why some people have said, well, that's a first step towards calling into question sovereignty and control. And again, it's very easy just to say, no, we're not going to take a bold step. Our view is that looking at the feasibility of making better use of the lake does not make any sort of statement about sovereignty. It does not commit any government to taking any specific steps.
Ambassador, speaking of the political process between Kosovo and Serbia, are there any joint efforts between the US and EU when it comes to the Brussels dialogue? And to what extent?
We stay in very close contact with our European Union colleagues, here in Belgrade, in Brussels, in Washington. Ambassador Grinnell talks to the Europeans. Matt Palmer, who is the State Department Special Envoy for the Western Balkans, that's his job. To work with the Europeans and others to try to move this forward. Matt Palmer was in Brussels recently meeting with Mr. Lajak, for example. So it's definitely not a rivalry. It is a partnership.
During the talks on expert level last week in Brussels, Serbian side has conditioned the continuation of these talks by creation of association of Serb majority municipalities. On the other hand, Kosovo government said that Kosovo will create this association, but after the recognition. What is your comment on that?
My comment on that is I think you should set up an interview with the European Union Special Representative here. I think that that you need to talk to Kosovo government and the EU about the details of discussions in Brussels.
Do you expect Kosovo to create the association soon?
I don't have anything for you on that today. I don't know.
Okay. Ambassador, also Kosovo leaders in many cases said that the country has made enough compromises when it comes to Serbian community through the Ahtisaari plan, and that it will not make any more. But on the other hand, Serbia doesn't seem that it will strike a final deal without getting something in return. How do you look at it?
I think without getting into the details of Ahtisaari or the political process in Brussels, I think that it's impossible to get to a comprehensive agreement without compromise by all parties. In my experience as a diplomat, a successful agreement never has everybody completely happy. Everybody always feels that they gave up something. Maybe they gave up too much. That's how you get to a successful agreement. And the Serbs have their own perspective on Ahtisaari and what has happened in the past. I think that in order to move forward, everybody is going to have to take a fresh look at everything. That doesn't mean that previous agreements should be swept aside. It means that people have to focus on how to get to yes instead of just saying no. And when I say people, I include Serbia in that. This is an area where everybody is going to have to take courageous steps to bring about change.
Going back to the agreement in Washington, are there going to be any more meetings in Washington, any more agreements like the one on economic normalization?
I don't have anything to announce at this time. I think right now that Kosovo and Serbia and my colleagues in Washington and I are focused on encouraging implementation of the agreements that were made in Washington. There's a lot of work to do. It was very important for Kosovo and Serbia to make these commitments, but turning a commitment on paper into a railroad, into a highway, that takes real work, and it's going to take some time. And we're not going to waste any time on this. That's why we're working. There were people who thought that the Americans just wanted to get everybody to Washington to have a photo opportunity, a nice picture of everybody in the White House, so it would be the illusion of progress. That is emphatically not the case, and I think the fact that we have this delegation, flying here today is an indication that we don't want just symbolism. We want action. We want to turn these pledges into reality, and the United States will be part of that process.
Is anyone else striving for symbolism?
I think that it's easy to get caught up in process, okay? And we have consistently said we want results. I mean, that's the nature of our diplomatic approach in the Balkans now. And the fact is, the Trump administration has shown more interest in actually bringing about economic development in the Balkans than any other American administration in many years, Republican or Democratic. It is clearly a high policy priority of the Trump administration. Now, one thing I can say with confidence is that support for Kosovo and support for close relations between Kosovo and the United States is it's a bipartisan goal in the U.S. Democrats, Republicans both care about Kosovo. It's a very close relationship. It's a special relationship. But the current administration is doing a lot to actually bring about change.
Moving to our last question, Ambassador, the Quint has called on the government and Assembly to oppose any attempts to undermine or discredit the mission of the Kosovo Specialist Chambers and the Prosecutor's Office, and to ensure that they carry out their mission in line with the Constitution. Are there such attempts, and who do you think is behind those attempts?
I think it is clear, it is no secret, that there are people in Kosovo who don't care for the specialist chambers. They feel that it is inappropriate for there to be a court which is focused on crimes that may have been committed, accusations of crimes in Kosovo, and that does not have a broader mandate, including crimes elsewhere in the region, crimes at an earlier period of time during the 90s. I get that. My government's position is that the Balkans needs more justice, not less justice. That the answer is to make sure that all of the national court systems are actively pursuing justice regardless of what community the victims or the alleged perpetrators are from. I mean, there are people, I'll put the language even more directly. There are people who say, why is there a court that is focused primarily on Albanians when so many Serbs have not faced justice? Again, our view is the answer is not less justice, it's more justice. Now, with regard to the specific cases underway, in Kosovo, as in the United States, there is a presumption of innocence. We assume that anybody is innocent and they deserve to be treated that way until they have been found guilty in a court of law. So the fact that somebody is indicted or is under consideration for indictment doesn't mean they're guilty of anything. We want the court to be able to function, and in that regard, we think it is important that, that everybody give the court the opportunity to do its job.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. Thank you.
Great pleasure.
Pleasure likewise.